The sound of hurried footsteps echoed around the lobby of One World Trade Center, blending with the early morning energy as people rushed about their routines. Among the crowd, Carmen walked quietly in her navy blue custodial uniform, pushing a cart loaded with supplies. She moved with a steady calm, barely drawing any attention, as if she had become a familiar and almost invisible part of the building itself. Business people and managers hurried by, usually never glancing her way. But then something out of the ordinary happened. A loud conversation in Mandarin rose above the usual buzz, and Carmen paused for a second, listening. Jacob, the CEO of Pine Hill Corporation, happened to be walking past at that moment. The sound caught him off guard, too. When he stopped, curious, he looked over and was surprised to see Carmen chatting easily in flawless Mandarin with two lost visitors. Without missing a beat, she shifted between English and Mandarin, helping answer questions about the elevators and even pointing the way to a conference room. In those few minutes, Carmen handled a handful of logistical snags and solved problems before anyone else noticed. Jacob stood there watching, realizing, maybe for the first time, that he had never really seen Carmen. Not like this, not for who she was beyond her uniform. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a bit of guilt, Jacob decided not to walk past as he normally would. Instead, he stepped over to Carmen, smiling politely. At first, he just thanked her for helping the visitors, but he quickly found himself asking how she had learned to speak Mandarin so naturally. Carmen answered with an easy shrug, explaining that her father grew up in China and taught her the language when she was a child. Jacob's surprise must have shown on his face, because Carmen then added, almost as an afterthought, that she also spoke Spanish, French, Russian, German, Italian, Portuguese, Japanese, and of course, English. She listed these languages smoothly, straightforward, without showing off, just stating facts. It struck Jacob how genuine her words were, how little she seemed inclined to impress anyone. She was simply herself, and her talents came out naturally. For a moment, Jacob felt awkward, thinking of all the time and resources Pine Hill Corporation had put into hunting for global talent, sending recruiters to far-flung places, when someone like Carmen had always been right here, part of the building's daily rhythm. The encounter was brief, but it lingered in Jacob's mind, making him restless. He went to his office, but all day he kept replaying the conversation, thinking maybe he had been missing something important right in front of him. As the elevator doors slid closed and the soft hum of its ascent began, Jacob and Carmen stood side by side, sharing a quiet that felt heavier than usual. Jacob had surprised himself by inviting Carmen up to the top floor, a space she had rarely, if ever, seen. Carmen, used to being a background presence in the building, wondered what exactly this meeting was about. Still, she kept her posture, calm and her eyes forward, carrying herself with the quiet dignity that came from years of simply doing her work without fuss. She had learned long ago to be careful, to watch first, and speak only when it mattered. For Jacob, the elevator ride let his mind race faster than the floors passing by. He glanced at Carmen, wondering how 9 languages and so much talent could have stayed unnoticed in Pine Hill Corporation for so long. Each time he saw the polished metal walls and the expensive decor of the executive floors, he was reminded of all the ambition and planning that happened here. Yet now, standing next to Carmen in her simple uniform, it hit him how often real talent goes unseen, covered up by routine and the uniforms people wear every day. He wondered how many other stories like hers might exist in the tower, waiting to be noticed. Inside Jacob's office, sunlight poured in through the wide windows, making the skyline of New York look almost soft. Jacob motioned for Carmen to sit across from him, sensing that this conversation was far more important than any meeting he had planned for that morning. He leaned forward, asking her honestly to tell him about herself, nothing held back. First, Carmen hesitated not out of fear, but because she was so used to no one really asking. But then she looked into Jacob's eyes and saw he was genuinely interested. She began by sharing how she had once dreamed of being a professor, of traveling and using all the languages she loved. But her life had taken hard turns. Her husband had passed away suddenly, and she became the sole provider for her young daughter. With college on hold, she took whatever job she could get, first in restaurants, then cleaning offices. Through all this, Carmen kept learning in her spare moments, practicing new languages by watching old movies or talking to neighbors. It was never easy, but she never resented her path. As Jacob listened, he felt the certainty of his own judgment slipping away. There was no bitterness in Carmen's voice, just a steady honesty shaped by tough choices and a kind of strength that did not ask for pity, only for a fair chance to show what she was truly capable of doing. Even when times were tough, Carmen never let go of her love for languages. She described how she squeezed in learning whenever she could, reading library books on her lunch breaks, listening to language podcasts on her commute, and sometimes trading favorite idioms with the building security guards, a few of whom spoke languages from their home countries. Talking about how words connected people and opened doors, her eyes lit up for the first time during their conversation, her quiet pride shining through. Jacob listened closely, seeing her passion was not just a hobby or a passing skill. This was dedication, the kind that did not depend on diplomas or impressive lines on a resume. Carmen had built her knowledge, little by little, with determination and creativity, even working double shifts at times to keep her daughter's dreams within reach. It was hard not to feel respect for that kind of grit. By the time their conversation drew to a close, there was a shared, unspoken agreement between them. Neither Carmen nor Jacob knew what exactly would come next, but both sensed that something had shifted. Even as Carmen gathered her things and prepared to leave, it felt like the start of a new chapter for both of them. A few hours later, Jacob's restlessness had only grown. Unable to shake off what he had learned, he found himself taking the elevator all the way down to the basement level of One World Trade Center. Down there, the air was warm and thick with the smells of cleaning supplies, and the corridors were a maze of carts, equipment, and stacked boxes. The usual quiet hum of the place was a world apart from the buzzing upper floors. As Jacob walked through, he took in every detail, noticing people moving efficiently, but mostly unnoticed. He could not help but think about how much talent might be working here in the shadows, much like Carmen had been. He eventually found Carmen busy organizing her supplies, moving quickly between shelves and checking off a list on a clipboard. Jacob approached, a hint of urgency in his voice, and explained that he needed her help. The company's interpreter for an important meeting with visitors from Germany had just called out sick, and time was running short. Jacob asked if she might step in as translator. Carmen looked up and nodded, not even hesitating. There was a calm confidence about her, like this was just another problem she was happy to solve. As they headed upstairs, Jacob felt a sense of optimism, knowing that this meeting was about to take a whole new turn. Inside the main conference room, the energy was tense at first. The German guests were polite, but a little on edge, clearly worried about how smoothly things would go without their usual translator. Carmen stepped up to the front table, calm and focused, and began translating every word with care and clarity. She not only made sure the right words were said, but also caught the subtle meanings and feelings behind them, switching easily between English and German. Soon, she was even catching a joke here and there, translating it with a small twist that matched each culture's sense of humor and made everyone laugh, including a few jokes playfully thrown in Portuguese when she realized one of the visitors had family ties to Brazil. Jacob watched all this unfold, honestly amazed. He could see the change happening in real time. The atmosphere shifted, people loosened up, negotiations became less formal, and genuine smiles replaced stiff handshakes. Carmen's presence smoothed out every rough edge in the conversation. It became clear to Jacob that what she brought to the table was not just her knowledge of 9 languages, but something far beyond that. She brought understanding, connection, and respect, things a digital translator could never provide, no matter how advanced the software. After the meeting wound down and the guests filed out, with plenty of smiles and promises to follow up, Jacob found a quiet moment with Carmen near the window. He was still thinking about how smoothly everything had gone. Curiosity got the best of him, so he asked how much professional translation work she had really done before. Carmen shrugged, explaining she never worked formally as a translator because her first priority was always her daughter. She had helped out friends, neighbors, and her church countless times with translation, but could not afford to spend the time or money to get certified or chase after official jobs. The pride in her voice was gentle but unmistakable as she mentioned her daughter had just graduated from Columbia University, describing it as her real accomplishment. Hearing this, Jacob realized things had shifted between them. The conversation did not feel like a boss and an employee anymore. It just felt like 2 people who understood each other. It was not about titles, offices, or even the big meeting that had just finished. There was a sense of shared respect, sincere and natural. Jacob walked back down the hallway, already making up his mind. He was not going to let Carmen's gift go unnoticed again, not after today. The next morning, Carmen made her way through the busy hallways of One World Trade Center, catching more glances and overhearing a few whispers from people she barely knew. For the first time since she started working there, Carmen felt the eyes of the office following her, curious about why she had been called upstairs. She could not tell if this was a good sign or something to worry about. But she kept walking, head high, reminding herself she had nothing to hide. When she stepped into Jacob's office, the sunrise was streaming across the room, making everything look a little brighter than usual. Jacob was waiting for her, looking more thoughtful than she had ever seen him. He started the conversation differently that day, talking about how easy it was to miss real talent when people only focused on job titles or the way someone looked in a uniform. He admitted that he had almost overlooked her, and that the company had been losing out by ignoring the abilities of people like her. Then Jacob went on to explain something that sounded almost unbelievable. He had created a new position, one built specifically to take advantage of Carmen's skills, experience, and the way she connected people. Jacob went on to explain the new opportunity, describing a role where Carmen would take charge of cultural and international relations. She would be working with teams across the company, helping suppliers and clients from around the world feel at home and understood. It meant she would be the person everyone turned to when they needed help bridging gaps, smoothing out misunderstandings, or making someone from a different background feel included. Carmen listened in shock. The job sounded important, more important than anything she could have imagined, but a wave of worry ran through her. She glanced down at her hands and quietly admitted, "I'm not sure I'm qualified for something like this." Jacob shook his head and leaned forward, his voice steady and clear. He told her that life experience and genuine skill mattered far more than any certificate or college degree. He said he was ready to handle the pushback that might come from others in the company. For him, this was about doing what was right, about recognizing people who really made things better, no matter where they started. Carmen felt the sincerity in his words. For the first time, she thought maybe, just maybe, someone really saw the difference she could make. Carmen took a deep breath before saying yes, her voice a little shaky as she talked through what the change would mean. She admitted her worries about fitting in upstairs, unsure if the other employees would fully accept her in this new position, since they were so used to seeing her in a different way. She did not want to pretend her story had started anywhere, else so she made a simple request. She asked if she could hold on to her old uniform as a keepsake. For Carmen, it was important to remember her first steps in the company. It mattered that she never forgot those early mornings and late nights when she was just another face, making things work behind the scenes. Jacob listened and nodded, telling her he respected her honesty. He promised the company would help, however. It could, whether that meant extra training, a mentor, or anything she needed as she learned the ropes. He reassured her that no one's background should ever get in the way of moving forward. When they stood up, their handshake was more than a formality. It was a quiet promise that things were changing, that the company was ready to look at people differently, starting with Carmen. Word of Carmen's promotion spread through One World Trade Center faster than she expected. By lunch, people were already talking about her in the elevators and over coffee in the break rooms. Some said it was about time, recognizing all the extra work she had always put in. Others guessed it was Jacob trying to shake things up or make a statement about the company's future. There were even a few who quietly wondered if this was just politics or whispered that someone like Carmen was not management material. Not everyone was happy, and a couple of old faces she used to share lunch with now gave her oddly tight smiles or changed the subject when she walked by. The first morning in her new office was a strange one. The desk was bigger, and the skyline outside her window looked completely different from the view down on the first floor. Carmen liked the sunlight, but could feel the tension in the air. When she attended her first team meeting, it was clear that a few people doubted she belonged there at all. Some offered polite congratulations, but others seemed distant, chatting quietly between themselves. Carmen realized she would have to work hard, day after day, to show she brought more than just a new title. Carmen did not have to wait long for her first real test. In her second week, Mark, the head of international operations, called her into his office without much of an introduction. He had a reputation for being sharp and a little cold, and he wasted no time letting Carmen know he doubted her qualifications. With a half smile, he questioned whether she knew what it took to handle tricky negotiations or spot a cultural misunderstanding before it turned into a problem. His words had just enough sarcasm to make it clear he did not think she would last. Long in her new role, Carmen listened to everything he said without flinching. Keeping her voice calm, she told Mark she understood his concerns, but she was ready to put in the work and learn quickly. She mentioned that her past might not look impressive on paper, but she had solved plenty of real problems by being patient and listening. There was nothing defensive in her tone, just a quiet confidence and a willingness to improve. Later that evening, as things were winding down, Jacob stopped by her office to check on her. They ended up talking about moments in their lives when others had doubted them, and discovered they both knew how it felt to prove people wrong. That small, honest conversation made Carmen feel less alone and gave her a fresh sense of belief that she really could handle whatever came next. Although Carmen still felt nervous most mornings, she made up her mind not to blend in, just to make others comfortable. Instead of thinking she had to change who she was or act like someone else, she focused on doing her new job with the same honesty she had always shown. She figured it would be a lot tougher if she tried to copy the people around her instead of sticking to the way she knew how to work. On some days, whispers and judging looks from a few co-workers made her question if she was doing the right thing, but she pushed those thoughts aside. Carmen reminded herself her story mattered, that she had already come further than most people. Realized, whenever she felt out of place in meetings or doubted her next move, Carmen would remember the long shifts she used to work, walking through quiet hallways when almost everyone had gone home. She would think about the times she nearly gave up and how she had kept going night after night. Her old janitor badge, tucked safely in her desk drawer, was her way of never forgetting where she came from or how hard she had worked to get a chance like this. That memory gave her strength to face whatever came her way. Soon after, an official announcement went out to everyone at One World Trade Center. Jacob took care to write it himself. He talked about Carmen's skills and the unique perspective she brought from her own path through the company, but he stayed away from calling her promotion an act of charity or a feel-good gesture. He wanted people to understand that Carmen had earned her new title the hard way. Nothing had been handed to her. He used words like merit and determination, making sure the whole team knew this was not about checking a box or scoring points, but rather about putting the right person in the right place. Of course, some folks still held on to their doubts, giving polite nods while sharing their opinions behind closed doors. It became clear that changing minds would take more than any email, but little by little that began to happen. A few of the international clients had smoother experiences visiting New York because Carmen took time to learn what made people comfortable, and old problems that had been ignored were suddenly solved with less fuss than before. Carmen stayed out of the spotlight, letting her work speak for itself. Slowly, some co-workers started to see that maybe she really did belong. One morning during an important meeting with business partners visiting from Northern Africa, Carmen did something nobody expected. As soon as the introductions finished and formalities were out of the way, she switched from English to Moroccan Arabic, greeting the guests in their native tongue. For the first few seconds, there was silence. Then the visitors' faces lit up and the whole tone of the room changed. All at once, it felt less like just another high-stakes meeting and more like a real conversation. Walls of uncertainty fell away as Carmen spoke, and people who had started off guarded now leaned in, sharing ideas and stories about their work and families back home. Questions that usually dragged on for ages got clear answers, and a couple of business deals that had stalled for months found new life during that one afternoon. When the meeting ended, one of the guests pulled Carmen aside. He thanked her, visibly moved, for making the effort to speak to him in a language that felt like home. He said it was the first time in years he truly felt listened to inside a Manhattan boardroom. For Carmen, that simple moment, a real thank you from someone who had felt overlooked, meant more than any title or company memo ever could. Jacob, having witnessed the effect Carmen was having on the whole company, decided to honor her in his own quiet way. He did not make any grand speeches or hang banners in the lobby, but he arranged for the main training room at One World Trade Center to be renamed after her. It was a small change, just a new sign on the door and a subtle update in company emails, but it meant a lot more than words could say. For those who noticed, it was a sign that the way things worked in the company was starting to shift. Carmen's story was becoming part of its fabric, an example that talent and grit were valued over old habits and appearances. That afternoon, as Carmen was sorting through the last of her paperwork, she found a letter slipped between reports on her desk. There was no name signed at the bottom, just a simple message from someone who wrote about feeling overlooked in their own role until now. The writer shared that watching Carmen rise through the company had given them hope that their own story could change too. That quiet note made Carmen smile, realizing her journey was not just about her anymore. Her presence was quietly making waves, encouraging others to believe in new possibilities for themselves. Of course, not everyone welcomed these changes with open arms. Alan, a long-standing member of the board, called Carmen into his corner. Office one afternoon. The tone was stiff from the moment she stepped in. Alan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and wasted no time getting to his point. He questioned Carmen's background and whether she really had the know-how for such an important role. His words hung heavy in the air, echoing old doubts she had faced before, only this time they were dressed up in business language. Carmen did not flinch. Meeting Alan's eyes, she laid out a list of results she and her team had achieved since she took over. New deals closed, positive feedback from clients, and the improvements in office morale that were starting to show. She explained that real progress was measured by what actually got done, not just by fancy degrees or titles that looked good on a resume. Her answers were clear and left no room for excuses. For a long moment, Alan did not know what to say. This was the first time he had been faced with such confidence from someone who was not protecting their own status or afraid to lose something. That moment planted a seed of doubt in him, maybe for the first time. After the tense encounter with Alan, Carmen felt the weight of it linger as she headed home that evening. The city lights flickered outside the train window, but her mind kept replaying the conversation. When she finally stepped through her apartment door, her daughter Maya was sitting at the kitchen table, sketching in her notebook with headphones on. Without thinking twice, Carmen sat down beside her. For a while, they just talked about everything but work. What Maya was learning at school, their favorite street vendor snacks, how the Yankees were doing that season. Even the ordinary stories felt like a soft blanket wrapping around Carmen and steadying her nerves. That night, Carmen realized just how much her family's encouragement mattered. Their easy laughter and support helped her shake off the stress from work. It reminded her that whatever happened at the office, she had a place where she was always enough. The next morning, she got up early, took the subway back to One World Trade Center, and dived straight into another round of meetings. She switched from English to Spanish without missing a beat, helping colleagues bridge gaps and resolve problems. As she walked down the hallway, she noticed a new message on the whiteboard: "We see you." It was simple, but it made all the difference. Carmen felt certain she was exactly where she needed to be. As the weeks went by, Carmen's role at One World Trade Center kept growing in unexpected ways. People from all parts of the building, new hires and old-timers alike, came to her for advice, not just on languages or culture, but on handling tough situations at work or finding their voice in meetings. She became known for quietly listening, and then offering simple, down-to-earth suggestions that actually worked. There was an easy trust in the way people talked with her, and slowly, the energy of the company began to shift. It was clear now that skill and heart mattered more than where someone started or what title they carried. Working closely with Jacob, Carmen helped launch a new internal development program, one that focused on giving a chance to employees who might not usually stand out. They worked together to find the hidden gems, the people who worked hard in the background and rarely got noticed. Carmen often met with these employees, sharing her own story and listening to theirs. At a company-wide event, the biggest of the year, Carmen took the stage and spoke from the heart. She told everyone that no one should ever be defined by the clothes they wear or the job they started with, but rather by the value they bring and the difference they make every single day.